Hello, I'm Eagle Gardens 1 on Instagram, and this is fucking talking shit with Eagle, episode 377. Hopefully, you guys have had an amazing 417. I know there's a lot of 420 events going around the state. A few people I know probably right now, probably watching this, cursing me because I'm not there, but hopefully, you guys are having fun. Got an amazing episode tonight. We have Mycophyte Solutions. Aria and Brandon here. How you guys doing? You want to say hello and tell us how we could find you guys on your social media?
Yeah, hey, I'm REA, and we are Mycophyte Solutions. So myco as in mushroom and phyte as in plant. And you can find us on Instagram at Mycophyte Solutions. And that's our best handle right now, or our website at mycophyte.com. And this is Brandon. You want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Brandon. For me personally, my Instagram is growing higher, and pretty much any like cannabis forum, that's going to be my name. Or you can contact me through Mycophyte Solutions, through our Instagram or our website.
You're muted there, Eagle.
Thank you. Thank you guys for being here and especially it being your birthday there, Brandon. I appreciate you taking time on your birthday to come out, hang out, and do this episode. So I'd like to give you a shout out on the air for that, brother.
Thank you.
So,
I appreciate it.
You guys have a great day. Where are you guys out of, if you don't mind me asking?
So we're around Eugene, Oregon. We're in the Willamette Valley here. We're close to a lot of the good farming areas in southern Oregon, and then a little bit more south from there is Humboldt County. So we're close to some pretty good cannabis growing environments.
Yeah, I'm personally down in Cottage Grove, which is about 20 minutes south of Eugene. And then we have one of our members, Sam, is out in Dexter, and Kyle's in Eugene, and then RA is out to the west. So we're kind of like cover the region.
Right on, right on. So what brought you guys all together? Was it how I should say what and how? What and how brought you all together?
Brandon, you should speak to this, at least of how you and Kyle got into all of this, and then I'll speak to how Kyle and I got to know each other.
So I met Kyle in grad school when we were going to the University of Wisconsin La Crosse around 2013, 14. We developed a friendship there, and we actually moved to Oregon together to pursue careers in this field and cannabis specifically. And we chose Oregon just because it had such a friendly, well, I chose Oregon because it had such a friendly cannabis business law compared to other states. Like Pennsylvania, you needed millions of dollars to get in. Oregon is set up pretty free market. Everyone was allowed a license at the time. So there were a lot of opportunities here. Kyle, I think, just loves the Pacific Northwest and had friends out here already. So he was drawn to the region. And we came out about 5 years ago, and both of us have found avenues of success. It's been very good since we've been here. Oregon's been great.
And so I met Kyle. I believe his first job coming out of grad school once he moved to Oregon was at a fertilizer company. He was doing research and development there, which is similar to what he does now at his day job. But I was working at that company as sort of my first real job out of high school. I had worked on farms a lot growing up, and I understood how to make a living growing cannabis. But so I had a job at this fertilizer company as my first real day job. And then eventually I got to know Kyle at that company in the research and development department. And that's how we got to know each other. We were developing a biological amendment for them. So if anyone's familiar with the term like living soils, we were tasked to produce an amendment that will help people to sort of activate their soils and bring more life into them. so that's how Kyle and I got to know each other. And then I left that company and I went to go work at with Dragonfly Earth Medicine. I did an internship with them in Canada. Their Instagram is popping off. You know, a lot of people have probably heard of them, and so that's where I sort of got my, I'd say, what cements my current place in the cannabis industry is my regenerative farming background and bringing more sustainable techniques into people's farming and soil building. And so then when I came back from this internship, I had a job opportunity with a local event to improve their compost. It was it was a festival producing a lot of paper waste compost, and it was making a problem for the neighbors with smells and flies and such. So, so I contacted Kyle, who, and then sort of with his mycology background, and I don't know, I often don't give myself enough credit in what I know how to do, but having the people with these backgrounds like Kyle and Brandon and our other partner Sam, they can talk in a way that big corporations or someone who runs a festival might like. So I pursued this job with Kyle to improve their compost at this festival, and that's sort of what that was the first real job that we did. It was Mycophyte. So actually, Brandon and Kyle had founded this company before then, but as far as I know, well, yes. So the compost job was the first job where we all really came together, and we used, I guess, what our mission statement is, which we haven't really introduced, is we use fungi and biology to improve the world. So that was our first job doing that out in out on the ground, improving the world with fungi. You're muted again.
Brandon.
Sorry, back in 2018, Kyle and I were kind of mentoring a new hemp and cannabis farmer or marijuana farmer. They're both cannabis. And he really pushed us to found a company for consulting. So we were originally really aimed at hemp farming and bringing kind of regenerative farming to that arena. And since Arya and Sam have come on, we've really ended, more towards traditional cannabis farmers and also just agriculture and habitat improvement. More generally, we're trying to get some jobs with watershed to do fire remediation and water quality improvement projects and things like that. So we've really broadened our range since bringing them on in the last 2 years or so.
You cut out a little bit, but I'll just reiterate that our other partner, Sam, he specializes in a lot of the habitat improvement jobs. So that's along watersheds, working for watershed councils, maybe establishing vegetation in areas. This past year, we've done a lot of stuff with burn, so post-fire remediation, both of maybe contaminants from a burned building, and then also in bringing biology back to a forest soil that's been burned at a high intensity by the forest fire, and that kills all the life in there. So, so this is sort of where we're bringing in some of these regenerative farming styles, or maybe these like mycological experiments almost, and we're putting them out there into different systems, so like watershed systems, and applying these ideas to different places. We'll get into it more later, but I might as well start talking about it now. Is soil remediation is a big part of what we do, both in soils that are depleted of nutrients and in soils that are contaminated with maybe petroleum pollutants or maybe even salt buildup from conventional farming or petroleum-based pesticide sprays. So that's a lot of what we're doing is, we're bringing in biology to these soils, both that are lacking fertility and soils that are contaminated with petroleum. And by bringing in these organisms, so we've all heard that maybe oysters are able to process some of the pollutants found in oil spills. Well, fungi in general, mushrooms and bacteria both, are able to break down a lot of these same things. So when we go out into an agricultural soil and we see that there's not much life in it and there's a lot of buildup of maybe some compounds that are hindering life, what we do is we're able to add maybe a biological amendment, or maybe we're able to put in some sort of practice or technique into this farming system and promote life in these soils. And the life in those soils are able to both process some of the maybe unwanted compounds in those soils, and they're able to unlock nutrients from the material itself, the soil itself. So that's really the biggest thing is we're bringing life into soils in any application, forest application, farming application, or pollution remediation applications. So that's, I know that you said you're not fully in tune with the permaculture stuff, but that's sort of where we're at and what we're doing as far as permaculture.
Well, that doesn't. I just because that's not necessarily where I'm at in the garden doesn't necessarily mean I don't have an interest, because that's where the cannabis industry seems to be focused right now. Is living soils, regenerative practices. So we're definitely all ears. This is definitely the right time for you guys to be kicking off this adventure for sure. And it's amazing what they can do, to be honest with you, as far as soil cleanup. I'm kind of interested in their ability to help us reamend the soil between uses. That seems to be the key to a lot of us want to reuse our soils, but we can't necessarily figure out a good program in the reuse. So can you walk us through a little bit on how microbes can help us do that? Or another question I've got for you too is when we're like, say, putting together a soil, could we necessarily count on the microbes to work ahead on of us? So could we like say basalts and stuff like that? Could we use more rockier stuff to count on the microbes to break down in like future uses? More chunky materials, basically, instead of
Oh,
a more fine
absolutely.
materials for long-term sustainability.
I'm not sure your exact question on the second part, but what you said about chunkier materials, absolutely. I think that is one of the biggest things that commercial soil and commercial compost is lacking. Is that enough to answer your second question? I didn't completely understand what you asked as far as materials.
Well, it was more or less a couple of questions there. The first one was how they can, in generally, help us rebuild the soil in between runs. And the second one was when we put together the soil, when we're mixing up a fresh batch for a bed there or a pot, can we actually count on the microbes in the long term and use more chunkier materials, more rocky, larger rock materials and chunks of uh, gypsum and stuff like that, depending on them, to break it down in a more slower, steadier long-term use versus like more finer crushed up material for quicker breakdown.
So I think that both of those questions are pretty connected. So for breaking down rock, definitely microbes and fungi especially can release nutrients out of rock eventually. That's going to take a long time to do that. And so if you do want a mineral boost, rock dusts are a great way to get that. And I'm not going to say that fungi breaking down large pebbles is going to, do what rock dust can do. That being said, what you're saying about whether microbes can really help us to make it from one round to the next and re-amend our soil, they really can. But what they have to do, what that has to do with our soil is for those proper microbes, so the microbes we want, the fungi and the right kinds of bacteria we're going for. We need to give them an environment that they're going to be able to live in throughout your grow cycle and until the next. So what we have found, especially what I've found in outdoor growing, is when you have active breakdown happening within your soils, when you have larger chunky material, maybe not rock, but maybe homemade compost that you were flipping in your backyard that isn't completely finely powdered. It's not super hot composted like you would get from the commercial compost down the road. So you have some active breakdown happening within your soils. Maybe you put wood chips in your soil as just like a mulch layer, or maybe you mulch with hay, and then the next year you come in and just put something right on top of that hay, and that hay is just turning into soil beneath. And what that does is it gives a habitat for the fungi and microbes that we want to live in those soils from cycle to cycle. And now, why do we even want those microbes? What are they even doing? Well, in a living soil environment, you want to have, like I said, active breakdown in your soils. But those materials that are breaking down are being broken down by the microbes, by the fungi, by the bacteria, and all the flora and fauna, all the insects and nematodes and such. So it's really by adding organic matter frequently, not even re-amending with amendments. You're not even buying like a bag of alfalfa meal. Like, you're just adding a new layer of mulch every year, maybe a small amount of nitrogen-rich compost. You're creating an environment that's going to have the fungi and bacteria that you want, that are going to create a balance in your soil. And I feel like I should let Brandon take over soon, because I don't want to be saying you want more soil biology because it's good. Like, that's not what I'm trying to say here. But what I am saying is, by incorporating larger particulates into your soil, along with maybe biological amendments, you're going to be promoting the diversity that you want. You're going to the balance that you want. And in commercial soils and composts, you don't have a diversity. You have a bacteria-dominated soil, and when you're reusing it, or when you're feeding your liquid amendments throughout the cycle, you're promoting more of that same kind of bacteria, and that anaerobic bacteria is not really, it's not going to be sustainable from cycle to cycle in the way we want. So Brandon, why is it good to have biologically diverse soils? Why can that be helpful?
Okay, so just to go back to the original question, I would separate the answer depending on what kind of grower you are, like things usually are. So first, if you're an indoor grower and you're recycling soil each cycle versus an outdoor grower that's operating in the ground. You could be an outdoor grower that's recycling soil in pots also. So if you're an indoor grower and you're actually taking the soil out of the pot every cycle, you can make amendments, mix it in, and it's probably going to be a bacterial dominated soil, which I am not. I'll talk about the whole Elaine Ingham thing in a bit, but for indoor growers, I'm not as convinced that you need this highly successional fungal soil to be successful or efficient as an indoor grower. It can work. I've seen no-till growers pulling it off. It's just a more difficult situation. You're going to be adding your additions to the top, so you really need a good biology in that bed to bring that nutrients into the soil. And if you're basically trying to mimic an outdoor ecosystem indoors, which is really susceptible to pest outbreaks. So people that are doing it really have to be on top of their IPM. I'm not saying it's not possible. I've watched people do it very successfully. So basically the whole goal of having this biology, and your question about the heterogeneity of the substrate materials, with like the Elaine Ingham school of thought, is that there's enough nutrients in the parent material, any parent material soil on Earth, that if you have the right biology to make those nutrients plant available, that you will never have to add nutrients. Okay, so that's plausible as long as you can get the biology operating at that level, right? And one of the things that helps that, if you think about outdoors in a natural ecosystem, you have soil particles, regardless of the type of soil. You're going to have soil particles that are, you have the soil layers, you have the humus layer on top, the topsoil, and then you have this kind of variable range of substrate material under that in size down to the parent bedrock. So there's naturally this heterogeneity for nutrients to be released. And obviously the smaller particles, the microbes have a greater surface area to work on and release those nutrients faster. So the smaller a particle of parent rock material, mineral material, the faster it's going to be released by a biologically active soil. So if you're creating a long-term soil that you want to use indoors, yes, use heterogeneous material, use large chunks of wood, large chunks of rocks, and, relative to your grow space. I'm not saying throw boulders in an indoor pot and expect that to break down. But yes, it would, you have this range of nutrient release over time if you have an active biology in there. If you don't have the right biology, then it's not going to be released fast enough, and you're going to have to add external nutrients, whether that's, extracts or teas of plants or something like that that's more readily available and not locked up in mineral form, rock form. So I guess I don't know. Do you have a direction you'd go as an indoor grower? What system are you thinking of when you ask the question?
Well, actually, I'm coming from cocoa. I've been in the soil years and years ago. I got rid of it because I was actually up in a upper grow attic space, and I couldn't handle the weight. I had to actually go to a lighter medium, so I went to cocoa. It's just all the way around, lighter, easier. But now, years later, I've been hanging out with good folks, the Smiley's Gardens, who is an organic grower, and trying to lure me into the world of organics. I'm slowly slipping back into the dirt. I'm on ground these days. I could take the weight, and I'm thinking about getting back into it. We did an earth box run against my cocoa, and earth boxes crushed it, to be honest with you. The overall structure of the plant, terp profile, and weight, we're all across the board better than the cocoa run. So I'm more and more interested in, soil type mix medium. But with that in mind, I'm kind of tired of, dumping things out. That was one of the reasons I ended up with cocoa. Is I'm in a chunky cocoa now. I mean, it's practically straight chips. I got tired of when I did empty out my pots around my yard, seeing all that perlite around the yard. So I went to a chunky cocoa, and now I'm headed back into a soil. And again, I don't like the perlite. And what I've learned over the years is that my plants love that high aeration in my medium. So I'd like to see that transfer over to a little bit into my soil mix as a high airy medium, which is organic. But again, if I didn't have to necessarily take the pot out and flip it, you know what I mean, and re-amend, I would be down for that as well. So that's why I was kind of hinting towards, could I build the pot once with a more chunkier material, leave room for some aeration, for a long period of time, but yet continue to break down and give without having to re-amend. That was kind of what I was aiming at there.
You're muted, Arya.
You're muted.
I don't like perlite. That's what I was gonna say. There's a lot of better things that we can do. Biochar is very similar to perlite on just to the structure of it, and you can charge your biochar with highly biological amendment, or maybe even a nutritive amendment. You can soak your biochar in a high nitrogen source, and then that will slowly be releasing into your soil. And biochar doesn't break down similarly to how perlite doesn't break down. Now, perlite, worms don't really like it, and from what I've seen, it's fungi doesn't want to grow on it either. Fungi, like at least the main kind of mycelium that I work with, the Stropharia rugosa lanulata, it would much prefer an outdoor environment soil. So like just underneath your pot, say you have your plant in a pot on the soil, I think that the mycelium will grow better right on the soil underneath the pot than it would in certain really light, airy soil mixes. And wanting aeration in your roots is good, but a dry soil, that just dries out once even, is going to have a lot less biology than a soil that stayed consistently moist. Maybe it was more wet at times and drier at times, but it consistently maybe had a cover crop on it or maybe a mulch layer. The organism, the communities in that soil are going to be a lot more active since they're not drying out. So I don't think perlite is necessary, and there's better options. Wood chips are great too.
So yeah, like with the cocoa based soil, even if you're using big chunky cocoa, it's still just all organic matter. That's really the main purpose of a cocoa media, is to serve as a physical media to hold the plant, and then also as a kind of a cation exchange sink where nutrients can latch on to this cocoa organic matter and exchange with the roots when it's needed. But something like a more mineral-based soil, you're actually breaking down the rock and accessing mineral nutrients that are, bound up in that rock. So with cocoa, as it gets old, it's basically just breaking down into smaller and smaller organic matter, and it'll become compacted. So if you're going to build a soil that you want to last for a long time, something like Coots mix uses the aeration material in there. I think it's a third aeration material, a third oak leaf mold, and a third worm castings is his basic mix. But the aeration material in there that he uses is something like lava rock. So it's something that's not going to, it provides like pumice or lava rock. It's going to provide aeration for a long period of time, and not really break down and become compacted like the cocoa would. So you need to provide something like that that's going to provide long-lasting aeration in the soil if you're creating this mix for an indoor situation. You're muted. There you go.
So how can they benefit me in just, overall in the mix, if I don't add anything? Say I've got the earth boxes here behind me. I actually just kind of cut the plant out and kind of just in the box, kind of loosen the top up and re-amend it with a 1/2 inch of compost. So What else should I be adding to that mix now besides what kind of microbes and what should I be adding to it to get it fired back up? Should I be
Uh,
adding anything to it?
well, so if it's an already active environment, which it likely is, the earth box growing environment does stay moist, and you are likely using bokashi, which is a good biological amendment. Um, so if this earth box is booming with life, um, you should only have to add a food source for that life. So in our own gut, we have prebiotics and we have probiotics. You can chug tons of probiotics all day, but if you don't have anything in your gut for those probiotics to live off of, you're not going to be getting their full benefit. So I would look into adding some larger material. So wood chips are really good. Composts, not like your commercial compost, but maybe like a compost from a horse farm or some sort of more chunky material. Those are all going to be good, slow release nutrients. And like Brandon said, lava rock is a really good instead of perlite. Worms can, crawl through the lava rock. Perlite is going to be really abrasive for a worm. On a molecular level, perlite is just a puffed piece of rock, similar to popcorn, and its surface is all glass dust. It's particles of silica dust. So you can see how a worm isn't going to be super stoked slithering up against that. And something simple like lava rock or biochar or even wood chips will be a lot better for the worms and all of the other organisms, all the other critters that you want.
So is there a type of wood chip that you guys suggest for cannabis? I know I grow well this last run when I did the earth boxes, I topped them off with a little bit of rabbit shit and a little bit of worm castings, and then I put some bokashi, Brandon Russell's bokashi on top there. And I had what I had left. I actually sprinkled into my chunky cocoa pots, and man, I couldn't. That chunky cocoa was brand new, and I usually will get a few 3 runs out of it on average before it starts breaking down into a fine powder that you would buy. Most people would buy. You know what I mean? I'm actually throwing it out at that point, or putting it out into the yard. And that bokashi broke that chunky cocoa down 1 run. 1 run. I mean, it practically looked like powder. I couldn't believe how fast it actually broke down that cocoa. So is there something that you guys that would suggest that for more long-term
Yeah,
aeration that would be beneficial for cannabis?
you're describing the whole goal. Like we want your growing media to be breaking down. That is the goal, and eventually you'll just have a big chunk of worm castings, and that's why you need to keep adding materials that aerate that material that's breaking down more and more. You want to add more carbon materials. So if you know anything about a compost pile, you need to have a certain amount of carbon and a certain amount of nitrogen. And the carbon basically turns to soil. Like what we're doing outdoors with hugel cultures and using wood chips on people as mulch for people, we're taking something that is going to either get burned or it's going to sit stagnant in the forest, and we're able to chip it up or bury it and turn it into soil in a very short amount of time, considering. So indoors, I'd say your large chips would be good, like what comes out of a landscape supply place. Hardwood chips are ideal because they will be less acidic. The breakdown of wood chips, or really the breakdown in general of organic matter, is usually going to be acidic. So most people that are feeding organic nutrients are aware that organic feed types are an acidic method. What we suggest people add to their beds is a mushroom producing fungi called the wine cap mushroom. It's also called garden giant or King Stropharia, Latin name, Stropharia rugoso annulata. And this just speeds up the breakdown of carbon material. And you were saying that your cocoa was broken down really fast by this bokashi. That is the goal. And as consultants, we have a lot more like tips and tricks to add biology to your soils and ways to basically produce these diverse environments that are able to break down organic matter. And what's happening when your chunky cocoa is turning into fine cocoa is nutrients are being released through the biology. And so that is the overall goal.
So if you're, I have a little bit different perspective on this. If you, so you're growing and you're using salt nutrients. Eagle? Yes. So if you're kind of like in that transition, you're not really fully on board on organics yet, and you're still in a cocoa-based media, and you want to incorporate biology, I would actually start with a bacteria type inoculant, something like EM1, or there's Bacillus liquefaciens is a bunch of stuff. I think it's in Botanigard, or not Botanigard. Botanicare has a hydro like root guard product. I think that's the species. It's in a few commercial species, something like that, or Bacillus subtilis. Because if you're adding something like bokashi, it's going to be dominated input, and that fungi is going to break down the carbon in the cellulose and the lignin in the cocoa. So it quickly is going to break down into that fine dust like you were talking about. So yeah, in a soil situation, if you're outdoors, that's great, and it's feeding the fungi, and you're creating long-lasting humates in the soil and all sorts of great things. But indoors, if you're trying to reuse that cocoa, it's just flying away as CO2, and it becomes compacted dust inside. So if you're not yet a full organic grower with that aerated soil mix that you've created, a fungally dominated input is going to quickly do that. So I would start with biology, unless you're going to make a switch. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, EM1 is the same set of organisms as bokashi, so they are largely bacterial. They both products do contain yeasts, which are fungal. So I hear what you're saying about not needing as much fungal activity in a cocoa-based soil. I definitely hear that. Indoors in general, if we want to be feeding through living soil methods, we do want our soil to be breaking down. We do want to only be feeding water when possible, because our soil should be releasing all that it needs. And so this is sort of the difference between your conventional agriculture and maybe your permaculture, regenerative agriculture type ideas. Is in your conventional agriculture, you're adding nitrogen-based inputs to your soil frequently, or whatever you're feeding. You're feeding it to a bacterially dominated soil, and as that soil builds up nutrients, the bacteria is the only thing that's going to be breaking it down. And why that's a problem is those nutrients aren't stored in that soil quite the same way as when you have a fungally dominated soil. So we would maybe compare a corn farmer and their fields that they till and they fertilize heavily. That soil is going to remain very depleted. Maybe it does have bacteria in it that's working to decompose the fertilizers or the soil itself, but there are going to be fertility issues in that soil in the future. Now, if you go and look at forest soil, old growth soil, or maybe even just an orchard, you're going to find a lot more of a fungally dominated soil that it's able to feed itself in the long term better than these agricultural systems where you're feeding, and the excess nutrients are running off or evaporating into atmospheric nitrogen. So I guess we definitely differ some, but from like a regenerative farming standpoint, which is not necessarily possible indoors, the term regenerative farming relates to you're regenerating the soil and the ecosystem around you while you're growing. So you're not just taking from your environment, you're giving back to it. So that's not always possible indoors. The goal, in my opinion, in any soil-based system is you're turning carbon into nutrients or plant biomass. So definitely having active breakdown is the goal, and Earthbox is a great system with the Grokashi. It is not fungally dominated, and I think that fungal inputs would improve that. And when you have a fungally dominated soil, it's not necessarily just going to turn to sand, because depending on the species, it will have mycelium that will hold the structure of the soil. It has the mycelium is the web-like network underneath the mushroom, and that mass, that white mass hypha, is extremely strong and capable of transporting nutrients and providing aeration to the soil, just in that it holds a structure in the soil. So I'm definitely not willing to say that fungal inputs are not useful indoors, but it needs investigated more, I guess. I think side-by-sides are really a good thing to do, to really compare, like, do I even need fungi in these soils? And I think people will see that as they incorporate more fungi, as they get the balance between bacteria and fungi more fungally dominant, they're going to see that they're adding less fertilizer. Maybe they're adding biomass like mulch or some sort of organic matter that is going to turn into soil, but they're going to be adding less liquid fertilizers and less dry amendments because they don't need it. They're getting that from the carbon.
And one thing I saw in the chat is people are talking about adding nitrogen when you're adding wood chips. And I do think that's important. If you add a bunch of just carbon heavy material like wood chips to a soil without maybe adding some nettle leaves or, comfrey leaves, something that's more nitrogen heavy,
So,
not so necessarily, but enough so.
So it really depends how you're incorporating those wood chips into your soil. If you're mixing woody material or carbonous material into your soil, you are going to have nitrogen robbing happen. You're going to have the nitrifying bacteria that's in your soil. It will be working on breaking down that carbon, which is, it's not going to be releasing the nitrogen to your roots as you would want. Now, if you're incorporating this carbon as a mulch layer, it's going to have far less surface area with your soil having that nitrifying bacteria, having nitrogen you need to grow your plants. And generally, especially if you have an active soil, or if you're inoculating while you're mulching, either with a fungal inoculum or a bacterial inoculum, even a good rich compost tea, you will be providing plenty of nitrifying bacteria to not cause a nitrogen suck. So basically, to directly answer that, if you're mulching, it's okay. It's not going to make a huge difference to the amount of nitrogen you're adding. And really, if you're mulching, I wouldn't add like a thick layer of high nitrogen material directly under, because that will likely cause the carbon to nitrogen decomposition. So when you have carbon and nitrogen in a big mass, it gets thermophilic, just like a compost pile. It starts working against itself. So I would incorporate some nitrogen, just as you would anytime you're re-amending, but I wouldn't add like way more, because you're adding.
What about like?
What's that?
What about, okay, if you're mulching, what about like a chop and drop amount? That's not going to go thermophilic on top of it.
Yeah,
But something like that would be
adding
appropriate.
some is good, but like I guess what I'm saying is if you're bringing in this new thing, like the idea of wood chips, I wouldn't add like twice as much amendments as you would otherwise. I would add about the same amount, really.
So I was asking the other night when I was talking about because on the earth boxes, I'm not going to go with the caps this round to kind of help keep the moisture in there. I've kind of thought I'd go with some wood chips or maybe possibly even the cocoa, chunky cocoa chips on top. Would I be would it be more beneficial to lay down like a mat like you would like a fabric like you would out in the outdoors under the wood chips to get maybe a better mycelium mat going directly under the chips there without the
You
two
could do
kind of
it.
interacting?
You could do it on top of the chips. I sometimes do that. Well, what I do here is I'll take your spawn bags like you would see with any mushroom propagation, and I use those to inoculate large windrows, so I can basically supply larger farms with this fungal inoculum. And yeah, I'll put plastic right on top of it. It holds the CO2 in, which the mycelium likes, and it does colonize well. If you've ever had a tarp outside and you picked it up, you'll see a lot of mycelium under it sometimes. Um, what I tell people when they're mulching with wood chips or anything is your goal is to never let the soil dry out. So if you want to not use your plastic cover, you could just use wood chips, but you want to make sure to be watering enough so the chips never dry. You got 2 inches of wood chips. The top inch can dry, but that bottom inch right on the soil, you never want to let that dry out. And that's going to help your soil biology, just all of the organisms within that. And if you're adding a fungal inoculum with your mulch, it will help to keep that growing and thriving. So I'm sorry, I might have not understood your question exactly, but are you considering running without the cover at all, or just putting it right on top of the soil?
Yeah, I was thinking about losing the cap altogether and actually putting some type of like a gardening fabric right on top of the soil, and then like you said, putting like a couple of inches of wood chips on over top of that to just kind of keep that moisture level
Yeah, I'd
on
skip
top
the
of the
gardening
soil.
fabric. I'd skip the gardening fabric. I just use a nice layer of mulch, being chips, or it really depends what you have. There's a lot of good materials. Maple leaves are great. Those are often raked up in huge quantities. Now,
Well,
you got me thinking.
be honest with you, I was kind of hoping to possibly get rid of the fungus gnats aspect of the soil. So would that help with it, or would they just continue to be in the wood chips
Well,
mostly?
I,
that's where your soil composition is a huge part of this. So if your soil is, even if it's all cocoa, even if it's the chunky cocoa, it's still one big mass. So as it shrinks down or gets watered, it's gonna not have much aeration within it, and it's gonna go anaerobic. And so this anaerobic fungi and this anaerobic bacteria is what the fungus gnats are feeding off of. So in my
I do.
experience, when you have a soil that's broken up and it's lighter, even if it stays wet, as long as it has a lot of different particle sizes and there's different size pockets here and there, you have a lot less problem with fungus gnats.
Yeah, I do agree with that, but I do think if you're having a fungus gnat issue, a layer of mulch would help. Some people use layers of sand to just stop a fungus gnat population, which works. Of course, you have issues with watering through different layers of soil like that, though, and I think mulch would approach that. You're going to have a little less success because in the decaying mulch they could establish, but it would also, like Arya said, help soil properties that would stop the problem to begin with. Also, is improving that aeration through mulch additions.
So you got me thinking, talking about running your earth box without a cover, about bacteria, anaerobic bacteria, aerobic bacteria, and facultative anaerobes. And so the set of fungi and bacteria within your bokashi product is the same set within a product called EM1. Now this is sort of like a good tidbit of information, and that is this bokashi or EM1 product contains facultative anaerobes. So that means they can live in an anaerobic environment or an aerobic environment, and no matter which environment they're in, they're going to be actively breaking down. It's a set of a variety of different species. So maybe one species is getting something from a wood chip, and then the excrement from that species is going to be eaten by a different microbe within the solution. So it's a very adaptable product, and it works really well in this anaerobic environment. Just the soil, compost, cover it in plastic, and let the facultative anaerobes do their work. Now, if you did that same exact thing and you didn't add any organisms, you didn't add any facultative anaerobes, you just added some compost, maybe amended with your worm castings or dry amendments, you're going to get a lot of anaerobic organisms. You're going to get a lot of anaerobic fungi, anaerobic bacteria, and these are going to be the organisms that are contributing more to your fungus gnat problems, or they can even contribute to pH issues and nutrient lockouts. And so this product, this bokashi or this EM1, is a great way to inoculate your soil with facultative anaerobes. So what they do is they take maybe the rotting anaerobic materials, your dry amendments, your compost, you put the plastic over it, and it just starts to kind of stink. It's rotting, it's clumping up, it's getting slimy. Now, if you add this product to it, it's going to turn these rotting organisms into more like a fermenting organism. That's how that product works. And fermentation, we know, is a way to aerate soil. Lactic acid bacteria is a Korean natural farming input, and it aerates soil. When you add lactobacillus or lactic acid producing bacteriums, that aerates the soil. So essentially, that earth box being sealed off using those facultative anaerobes in that product, it works. But if you were to not use that product, you would have a stinky mess with bugs and maybe even larvae and maggots and stuff. So it really is the biology that makes something like that work. And really that's the golden standard of what we're doing is we're seeing people with these huge pots full of this soil that they bought and this compost that they bought, and it's just all one thing. So it becomes anaerobic. And so maybe we'll tell them to use EM1, or maybe we'll develop something a little more, technical, maybe something a little more unique or custom to what they need to happen. But we're incorporating biology to fix some problems that people's soils have. And I don't know how much soil analysis Brandon has done, but I know Kyle, he does a lot of, he's a certified crop advisor, which is sort of a conventional agriculture certification, but it allows him to read soil analyses and see imbalances. Maybe the pH is thrown off, and maybe in his biological analysis with his microscope, he sees that it's a bacteria-dominated soil, and these bacteria are releasing exudates that are throwing off the pH. The anaerobic bacteria is causing an alkalinity problem. And so the biology, just like the soil chemistry, can solve a lot of our problems.
So I just want to go back a second. I was looking at the chat again, and some people were talking about like biological additions for or applications for fungus gnat control. And I just wanted to mention that if you don't, ideally the goal is to create this complex biological soil that has a diversity of organisms, and these problems are self-regulated, right? So you have a population of fungus gnats and it's no big deal because there's the right nematodes so that it controls them and it never gets out of control. But if you don't have those nematodes in oil, you might be able to buy them from, there are companies that sell predatory nematodes. There's also for fungus gnats and also root aphids, there's a handful of commercial products that have entomopathogenic fungi in them. So that means fungi that attack and kill insects. So something like Botanigard, I think, is the one with Bavaria bassiana. And then there's also some products with Iceria and Metarrhiza, which are all in a similar family. It's actually a really great story if you want to go on a tangent of the Claviceptaceae, which are the same group of organisms that infect grasses and cause ergot fungus on rye, which is the original source of ergot alkaloids, which are LSD is the feedstock for LSD, is ergotamine. So they're all kind of related. And it's a evolutionary story where the insect was, or the fungus was an insect pest. It jumped into the plant and then it jumped back into insects. It's really fascinating group of fungi. But there are some commercial products with them that you can use to control insects in your garden if you are an outbreak problem. Someone also mentioned SLF 100, which I think is an enzyme product. I'm not really how that works. And then also someone mentioned a dryback period, which I think is a really important to the first time you have a problem, the first thing you should do before you add or change anything is think about a cultural control issue that you could do. So maybe you're just watering a little too frequently because fungus gnats really thrive in moist soil. So if it's getting just a tad bit dry in between, it might disfavor them enough that the problem solves itself.
Great advice. Great advice. See, I don't have the fungus gnat problem yet, but I'm kind of keeping it in mind because I know it just kind of comes with the natural inputs. It's one of the worlds I've loved about the cocos and the salts. Keep that little problems at bay. But I like I said, I'm kind of getting tired of throwing things out in the yard. So it just seems to like if I'm going to keep growing and growing, reusing my soil just seems like the right thing to do at this point. After all these years, I think of the 2 yards that I've pretty much re-landscaped with my cannabis pots over the last 2 years. Well, 20 years, to be honest with you. But this yard, just up here, 5 years that I've been up here, I've been in a forest. And when I moved in, it looked like somebody sank this house in the middle of a beach. To be honest with you, it was so sandy. And I'm actually most of the time you would say the growers you would pick the growers out from the neglected yards is what they say. But mine's just the opposite. Mine's the only yard in the area that's actually green, and the rest of my neighborhood it's that sandy pop up grass. So I think I almost tell myself the opposite because of all the dumps in the yard from soil. But I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the expense. I'm tired of rebuilding my yard. I just, I need to build. So what I'm gathering too is like, is it more wise to gear towards a fungal bed if you're going to go towards a bed? If I were to build a bed, would it be more wise to keep it more fungal based so the plants could necessarily transfer nutrients back and forth and communicate a little bit more wisely with one another?
This is like people will disagree on this, but I've seen people that are super successful either way. I've seen people that are super successful just feeding with salts exclusively. So it's really about what your goals are. If your goal is to produce a soil that is getting better every time you use it, I really believe that you should be going for a carbon farming type system where your soil has carbon in it, and that carbon is being turned into soil as it gets, you take a wood chip and you soak it in water, it turns into a soft wood chip, and then your fungi and your bacteria can start decomposing that, and eventually your wood chip will turn into dirt. So I'd say if your goal is to have a permanent soil, you do want to have enough carbon in it that it will sustain itself throughout the year with all the organisms that are breaking it down. And what just a second ago we were talking about fungus gnats, and we're talking now about not having to dump soil out. And so a lot of times when people get a pest, they think that they need to dump their whole soil and scrub their whole room. And really, most pests are only there eating your plant because they don't have their preferred food source available. So roly-polies are a really good example. Pill bugs. They live in soils. They live in the wild. They live under debris, like woody debris is their main thing that they eat. So when you're bringing in a lot of woody debris into your indoor garden, and maybe pill bugs come in on your compost that you brought in, and maybe you just did the one thing. You say, oh, I'm going to bring in some wood chips and some compost, and I solved my whole problem. And then you see that you have pill bugs crawling around under your soil every time that you lift up some wood chips to look at your soil. You see a whole bunch of pill bugs, and they're starting to crawl up your plant and eat your leaves. You're like, crap, I need to start over. I need to dump this soil and start over. I'm never going to do that again. And what people need to understand is those pill bugs are actually really beneficial. They're working for you just like your worms are. They're eating things in your soil, and they're pooping at a pretty vigorous rate. So it's really important to give these things what they need to thrive, or in the case of fungus gnats, to stay at bay, to only live. You're going to have some fungus gnat larva present, but you need it to not become a problem. So it's really about, when you make an intervention to your soil, when you change something and you get a problem, it's about finding out how to achieve balance to fix it versus just killing everything. A lot of people are just like, I need to spray pesticides all over and just start over. And it's really important to just find balances, because a lot of these organisms are there for a reason, and you need to look at, why are they attacking my plant, rather than just, how do I get rid of them?
And there are things you can do instead of, if say you have a root aphid problem and you don't want to reuse the soil because you're concerned about that. You can do things that would remediate the soil instead of just tossing it out. Like you could, on a home grower scale, you could solarize it in garbage bags, put it in black garbage bags, lay it out thin on the ground, and lay it out on a hot day, let it get 150 degrees or hotter, and those root aphids are dead and the soil is good again. Of course, you're going to kill a lot of good soil. You can pasteurize the soil if you're really careful about it, and you can keep some of those beneficial bacteria and fungi in there living, but you have to monitor the temperature if you're going to do that. But if you're going to reset the soil like that, then you want to re-inoculate with some healthy soil or something like that. There's also, if you have a bad soil, and you have a good soil, there's something called suppressive soils. So there's soils that are identified, usually in natural systems, and you can take some of that soil from that field and put it into a diseased soil, and it solves the problem. And it's usually, whether it's one organism or a consortium of organisms in that suppressive soil that's doing it. So if you're going to do a soil treatment, you can do the same thing with where you're re-inoculating, whether you're buying EM1 or whatever kind of inoculant because you don't have some healthy soil to add back in. But if you have otherwise healthy soil, you can remediate your soil that way. And also, like with your spent cocoa, you know, you might have too much to really be practical doing this, but that can also be used as feedstock for worms. They're going to eat the bacteria on those and farther break it down and turn it back into it that you can add back into your system. So, you know, create one type of closed loop with that waste product.
Yeah, I had actually had Kuda on, and he was encouraging me to recycle my cocoa in that very same way. It's like, man, good. Well, I was talking to him. I had these big old air pots behind me there that I wasn't going to necessarily grow in again. I was just gonna just do something with them. He's like, fill them up with that old cocoa and put some worms in there. As long as you keep them wet, they'll stay in there. They'll stay in them. Perfect containers. But I had full intentions on doing that. But then again, I started bringing in more soil. There's more soil in this garden. There has been in a long time. I've been in cocoa for at least 15 years. At least 15 years out of the 20. And now it's coming back and there's more soil. The earth boxes, I started out with the 2 earth boxes. And right now I would say all in all, it's probably about 25 to 30 10-gallon pots of some type of soil mix. So right now I'm kind of doing like a side by side on some bases on what I want to put next here. I've got like smoking tomatoes. I've got a dairy dew. I've got M3 mix, and I've got the old earth box material with some compost on it, and I'm getting some Detroit Nutrients Company up here. Kind of just they're all labeled. I'm gonna try to see which one is the best to take off with, and I seen M3 in chat there. Everybody hollering out M3 is a good one. M3 is a good one. I did like the M3. I've ran it before, but the only thing I didn't like as soon as I opened up the M3 was it was loaded with perlite. And that was like immediately check minus against all the other 3 didn't have like a heavy perlite base. It had other things in it that aerated it, but it wasn't heavy perlite. You're muted, my friend.
Okay, so you're saying that the earth box yielded like probably just as good or better as your other systems, and the flavors were even better. So that is an example of how a biologically active soil will yield a better crop. That is the whole basis of what we're doing. But in the beginning, you kind of asked, why do I want this? And we've been trying to explain it the whole time, but I think this would be a great time to get into endophytes. That's one of the things that Brandon studies a lot. I think it's awesome to talk about, and I love learning about it. I'm not the best person to teach it though, but essentially, how I understand biological soils, how they're useful for us, in addition to the suppressive qualities they have and stronger crops and better flavor, is when you're breeding a variety in this biologically diverse soil, the seeds produced from that plant will already be adapted to that environment, and they'll know how to utilize the nutrients that are being released by those organisms. And so this partnership between the plant and these organisms can become so strong that they actually become one, and that the organism becomes part of the cell tissue of the plant. And I believe the ergot and rye is another example of endophytes. Brandon, do you want to go into why it would be good to have biologically diverse soil when it comes to endophytes.
Okay. So let's just start with what endophytes are. Basically, an endophyte is any microbe that can live within the body of a plant without causing disease symptoms. So this can be bacteria, archaea, or fungi. There's also, viruses and viruses that affect all of those within it. And then the endophyte fungi can have bacteria that infect it. So there's these multiple levels of organisms within any plant that you're growing. Unless you're growing indoors in a sterile environment with filtered air with UVC light from sterilized seed, your plant has other organisms growing within it. So what we want to do is, harbor an endophyte community that is beneficial for the plant. So the way that a plant acquires endophytes is one of two ways. So with claviceps and grass endophytes, which are they're well characterized in agriculture because there's a thing called staggers. So a lot of claviceptacean endophytes create these ergotamine toxins and ergot toxins that are toxic to mammals. So the staggers are when a bunch of sheep eat these ergot or ergot alkaloid infected grasses, and they start to have neurotoxic effects and stagger around in the field. Okay, so there's been developed endophyte-free grass varieties or toxin-free endophytes, and then they inoculate that into the grass variety. So it has an endophyte that still interacts with the plant immune system and gives it beneficial effects, but it doesn't have these toxins that affect the milk or the animals producing the milk. So it's safer for agriculture. Gosh, I got kind of off on a tangent there. Okay, so yeah, so the point of that was grass endophytes are vertically transmitted. So that means that a parent plant passes the endophyte through the seed. So it directly infects the plant body of the embryo and the seed, and it'll be in the next generation. So that may occur in cannabis, but most of the endophytes in cannabis are horizontally acquired. So there might be some that are in the seed. Most of the seed-borne endophytes are going to be on the surface of the seed, and the germinating seedling is going to acquire it as it comes out of the seed. And then as the plant grows, it's going to acquire endophytes from inocula in the environment. So if there's a forest nearby, it's those leaves are releasing inocula, and it hits the plant, it infects the plant. So if you have a healthy, and this is really like tying into permaculture where you're trying to establish a healthy, permanent ecosystem, and part of that is the endophyte community. So if you can have, incorporate perennial plants in your system that will harbor beneficial endophytes, they will transfer them to your annual plants each year, right? So there's a few papers that are coming, but most of the type of endophytes that infect cannabis are ascomycetes. So it's mostly Penicillium, Aspergillus, Cladosporium, Alternaria, things like that. And some of those are also pathogens. So something like botrytis can act as an endophyte. It can be a latent pathogen for most of the plant's life. So we want to avoid endophytes like that, and we can either develop products or consortia of endophytes and infect them on purpose, or we can develop this ecosystem that's just continually infecting our garden with these beneficial microbes. So there's a lot of research to be done on that. If people are trying to develop specific products where they add this endophyte and it can increase terpene production or something like that. And I'm not, there's some good research on mint endophytes that show that effect. So there's definitely potential for things like that to come down the pipeline, but I don't think anyone has a product that's there yet. But so as a farmer, I would focus on just cultural control of endophytes and establishing a strong ecosystem that's healthy that's going to keep on infecting your plants. And if you have a pathogen outbreak, you might have to do a reset or something like that. And then you might want to introduce new endophytes from someone else's healthy garden, whether you're bringing in dried plant materials, making a tea with it and spraying it on, or something like that, where you're just incorporating this plant material that has these endophytes in it from a healthy person's garden, kind of like you do with a suppressive soil to a diseased soil.
And so the research maybe hasn't been done, but Brandon is intrigued by this field and completely capable of doing that kind of research. So hey, if anyone has tons of funds and they're curious about learning about what's going on, this is the kind of thing that our company wants to do, and we're doing it in the fields of remediation. We're doing it in the field of plant establishment for watersheds, and we're doing it in cannabis in ways. So scientific background is our scientific background is able to sort of, we want to branch into these other fields, and we have the ability. I guess we just we need the projects to pursue. Sorry, Brandon, I cut you off.
No, I was just saying, my background on endophytes really it starts with my graduate experience. So my research there was on endophytes of the American chestnut tree and how they might be useful against. So the American chestnut tree has a devastating pathogen that was introduced to the US 120 years ago. And it basically wiped out Native American chestnuts. So I was looking for, there's remnant populations of these chestnuts that are root sprouting from these dead trees. And I was looking at endophytes from those root sprouts to see if there's some that are particularly antagonistic to the pathogen. And then hopefully the idea is that you can spray these pathogens, inoculate these pathogens in high densities on seedlings, and help to improve the plant's natural immunity. Since then, there's been a lot of research that shows maybe single endophyte applications aren't the best, and rather consortia operate better. So what I had done, I had isolated a bunch of endophytes and tested them in vitro in dual culture assays against the pathogen for antagonism.
So in vitro means in a petri dish, you place one organism and then the other, and he's calling the antagonistic. So if one is able to eat the other, that's what he was doing to find the right organisms.
Right, and then I found there were over 50% of the endophytes were antagonistic to the pathogen, and then I picked the top one, the top one. But if I could go back, I would have picked maybe the top 7, and then mix those back together and inoculated trees with it. And so I've kind of moved towards consortia, inocula ideas. And really, I've been thinking about low tech, like farming ideas, what people can do on their farm. And I've moved towards that, maybe like liquid cultures of dried leaves, things like that, just less selective. If you already have a healthy endophyte community, maybe we don't need to go through all that work first. Although if you want to develop a, more characterized product that definitely has antagonistic abilities, that's the work you have to go through.
And so I'm from the Dragonfly Earth Medicine School of Thought. When you're applying organisms to your leaf surface and to your garden in general, if you're going to brew a tea or ferment a tea, for me, I am taking leaf material and putting that in water and using the organisms on that leaf material to break down the leaves itself or plant material, whatever it may be. And that's how I make teas. They're both plant feeding tea and in an inocula for your garden. But I understand that some of these methods that maybe permaculture techniques they've been happening for a long time, they maybe aren't scientifically backed or proven. And so we're saying, hey, we're going to make this beneficial tea call it a probiotic way of feeding, where we're fermenting plant material and then we're feeding it. Or Korean natural farming does this too. Those teas are going to have a lot of microbes, and what you said essentially is many kinds of microbes can be endophytes, and we know that these microbes are beneficial to make our teas, make our fertilizers. The microbes pull the nutrients out of the leaf material, and that's what we want essentially. But if we just spray this tea that we made, this tea that's meant to feed our roots and our soil, our plants, onto the leaf surface, is that kind of a random inoculation? Is it not wise, I guess, or would it probably house a lot of beneficial endophytic activity? And I'm putting you on the spot here. you're
So
muted.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm kind of curious here now about the terps there. You're saying that they can be passed from plant to plant from endophytes and kind of increase terp profiles or act on the plant to create terps, right? But I've actually basically with a companion plant through companion plants, right? Is that what I'm gathering here? Right?
Do endophytes make more terps?
I mean, what I was saying is they can trigger the plant to produce more terpenes potentially, certain ones. They definitely interact with the plant immune system, and part of that is terpene biosynthesis. I didn't mean to say they were transferring terpenes from a companion plant, if that's what you're suggesting.
Well, I was working off each other to create terps or strengthen them is basically, and we've kind of talked about this around here as well, is about companion plants and terp production as well. Sometimes the companion plants actually work in a similar way through smells. The terps they produce irritate the cannabis plant and make them produce other terps as well. And I've wondered too, is the passing of terp profiles or terps through the soils, through the microbes. Do you think either any of these are possible in your opinion?
Absolutely, and there is research that's been done. I don't know where it is, so I can't cite it exactly, but living soils produce material that is more terpene rich, and that has been studied, and that is pretty consistent. I've even heard anecdotal evidence where people had a really good year with a really living soil, and their tests, or they're a recreational farmer, maybe their terpene content was way higher on that year. So absolutely. Brandon?
Okay, so I am very skeptical of claims like, oh, I grew it near a hibiscus, so my cannabis smells like hibiscus because it soaked in the hibiscus terps. I don't think there's evidence of that. I think that's probably mostly psychological, unless there are, unless there's a lot of, this is like really far out there, but there's circumstances where endophytes produce the same compounds that the host plant produces. Something like the U endophyte produces toxol, and so does the host tree. And there's the thinking is that there's horizontal gene transfer at some point between the host and the endophyte. So maybe if an endophyte acquires a terpene biosynthesis pathway from a host plant and it gets into your cannabis, it could make that terpene. That is conceivable to me, but I do not think it would be, even if that were happening, especially since cannabis has horizontally acquired endophytes. So that means it's a really diverse population of endophytes, unless you're heavily inoculating or something like that with a single endophyte. I do not think it would significantly add to the terpene profile. I think the effects from endophytes and rhizosphere bacteria and organisms on the plant terpene synthesis is by upregulating the plant's own terpene production.
Yes. So, but it does. So essentially,
yes, yeah.
an active soil that could be why, is it's synthesizing the terpene production of that plant. The study of why that's happening, that might be a little beyond what we're capable of doing, but anecdotally, and people have done it and done the tests, more living soil will have a higher terpene content, both when you crack the jar and on a test from the lab.
So when somebody comes to you guys and is looking for your guys' help, where do you guys usually start on a consultation? Is it something you guys do through video consultation? Do you guys come to the facilities? How do
It
you
really
guys work
depends.
about?
It really depends. We're 4 people, our company, and we all offer similar but different services. So, depending on the client, they might hire all 4 of us, and all 4 of us will sort of like take this part in the project and run with it. And we all sort of specialize in our own things. So a lot of the projects have been Kyle and I. He is the certified crop advisor. He still works research and development with the fertilizer company. So that's when I was introducing our company earlier. So he is working with conventional farmers on how to use the nutrients that they're buying, and maybe that's not the whole regenerative movement that our company is going for, but he is teaching people how to use these things appropriately and not overfeeding. And so what my point is he sees a lot of farms, and I have seen a lot of maybe the ideal farm scenario. My own connections. I'm a dragonfly DEM pure farmer myself, and so the DEM pure farmers in my area that I've visited, I get to see their farms and be like, wow, this is awesome, and sort of get to understand the workflow that really makes these regenerative systems work well. So usually we'll just talk with someone. We'll get them on the phone with either Kyle and I, or Brandon. He focuses a little bit more on seed production, which we haven't talked about at all today, but that is one of the main services he offers for us, in addition to his plant pathology services with endophytes, etc. And then Sam, he does habitat restoration, where that's more forestry work. He'll walk around your property and identify the natives and invasive plants and different ways to maybe promote more deer habitat or turkey habitat, or maybe do fire reduction zones, fire break zones. And basically he's more into the habitat, and it's all one, really. If you're running a regenerative farm, you're paying attention to the plants around. Your goal is to improve the environment around, so maybe you make it safer from wildfire, or maybe you thin the forest a little bit, and that's a touchy word, so we're not out there logging. We're just opening up the canopy to let maybe a berry producing plant grow in the underbrush, or essentially the whole picture. If you hire us, you're going to get, if you want us to come to your land based on where you are, you're going to get 1, 2, 3, or 4 consultants, all helping you design your land or project, your grow, in the way that we see fit based on our experience. And it's really project dependent, but we do such a variety of things too. So cannabis farms, that is what inspired our company for the most part, but we're open to doing so much more for people. Say they have a part of their property that never grew anything, or that's covered in invasives. Like, we could transform a part of someone's property into a productive, maybe a food production zone, or something that generates income. Or Kyle, Kyle and Brandon are both mycologists, but Kyle focuses more on mushroom production. So maybe if someone wants to produce their own food or produce mushrooms or different crops that can benefit their income, basically it's very site dependent, but all four of us have a different thing to offer as a consultation. And if anyone is interested, you can contact us through our website, and we will set up a phone call free of charge, and discuss how our services can help you. I'd love to talk about some of our other projects, but they're not all in the cannabis industry, and we're running out of time. So I don't know how deep we want to go tonight.
Well, I want you guys to, first and foremost, get to you guys' message across. Talk about whatever you guys want to talk about that is, based off of your project, your company related there. This is your time to get to know the community, or let the community get to know you, basically. And at least, who are the two consultants that we're referring to right now? I can see so far, the hour and 40 minutes we've been talking, two very intelligent gentlemen in front of me that I'd like to see more of, as it is anyway. So yeah, tell me whatever about you want to tell me, where you want to take the company, what you're currently working on. You mentioned Brandon here was working on seed production. We can talk any of the above. I'm all ears. This is that's what I was kind of getting at in the beginning is that's the point of this aspect of the show. I don't know how deeply you guys looked into what you were getting into tonight, but there's three aspects of this what goes on this YouTube channel. There's one, what you're doing now, and that's like a spotlight episode, and that's where I take the opportunity to get to know people in the cannabis industry, who people we see on Instagram, what they're about, what their basically mission statement is, products, services that they have to offer. I talk to small scale growers from home 1 to 2 plants to large recreational growers, light companies, everybody in the cannabis industry, to get to know them a little bit. And then there's a second aspect of the show, which is called the wormhole, and that's always open to past guests, any past guests, and that's like a mix of knowledge and topics that goes on from variation from night to night. Say when this cuts out, the wormhole will open up, and whoever pops up, or whatever topics pop up. Sometimes it might be mycology, it might be growing in general, it might be cloning, it might be mushrooms in general, and psychedelic trips are not far out of the conversation in the wormhole. And then there is the organics takeover, which is once a month by Smiley's Gardens, and he talks straight up organics and regenerative conversations towards gardening. That's why I said when you guys came in, I was like, man, you guys are way over what should be done here, because Smiley's very intelligent as far as what goes on in the organics world, and he would have been a much better fit, especially on a 2-on like this. He would have been a great addition to this, to pull more or better questions out of you guys than better answers rather than I would have been able to do tonight. But so with that being said, I don't want to lessen your guys' opportunity to get your guys' message and who you guys are and what Mycophyte Solutions is about. So please tell me whatever you want to tell me, guys.
Well, I'll just give my general, I don't think I've talked about my general cannabis background, so I'll just start there and then get into seeds a little bit. But basically, I started smoking when I was 15. I was going through, personal crisis at the time, trying to expand my mind. I sought it out from a neighborhood girl that had access to that sort of thing. And I smoked a joint to my face by myself while my friends were there, but they weren't interested. So that was my first experience. And the next year I ordered seeds through Gypsy Nirvana at the time. And then I got on overgrow.com back in 2000 and taught myself how to grow. So I was growing when I was 16, was my first grow in a little trunk in my room. And then I tried an outdoor grow that got completely eaten by a deer. So the first successful harvest was the next year. And so it's my 36th birthday today. So it's going to be 20 years this year that I've been growing. And I mostly was black market, obviously, for the majority of that until I moved out to Oregon. And when I moved out here, I was lucky enough to land in a town near Eugene, which had an autoflower breeder, which was a long been an interest of mine. I lived in Humboldt back in 2012, and that's when I was kind of introduced to light depth. And I was watching these people spend so much time, so much plastic and infrastructure light depping these plants. And I knew Lowrider had, I grew an autoflower back in 2006. I knew these existed. They just weren't there yet for the Emerald Triangle. They still aren't, in many of their opinions, for them to adopt them. But they're getting there. And the company I work for in Cottage Grove is New Breed Seed. So we just sell to OLCC producers, but we only do autoflower seed. And I've just learned a lot about really traditional plant breeding and breeding a plant. Autoflowers are so different than photoperiod breeding and traditional cannabis breeding, because traditional cannabis breeding is generally done like a hops breeding program, where you take an elite polyhybrid clone, you find another elite polyhybrid clone, and you mash them together and see what comes out, and then you pick the best ones. But to sell that, a hops program never sells that seed to someone, or a potato program is done similarly. They don't sell that seed. They go through the clones and then find the asexual clone that's the best, and then that's the material they sell. Right. So with autoflower, with photoperiods, people have kind of become used to, oh, I get a pack of seed and there's a bunch of phenos and I get to hunt my best pheno. That's great if you can clone that pheno and keep it forever. But with autos, that plant is alive, flowers, it's dead. So you want every single seed to be a keeper from that seed pack. And you want farmers to be able to plant, 10,000 seeds in an acre and all get harvestable plants. So I've really learned a lot about, hybrid breeding or open pollination variety development, with the goal being a uniform field ready variety. So I can really help farmers develop breeding schemes, whether they want to do photoperiod, if they want to do the pheno hunt type breeding scheme, that's great. We can develop something like that. Or if they want to develop, a seed stable variety over time, we can get really deep into the breeding. Yeah.
So do you see the photos being more of a biomass or used for oils or extracts in the future, or do you see them being, bred well enough that they're actually used for straight up flower?
So I think you meant autoflowers. Are the autoflowers ready?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think there's a huge potential for them for oil production. Especially, I'm really excited. We are working with a grower in Southern Oregon this year, and I'm hopeful that he's going to grow some autos and run them as live rosin. They really have great. The ones from New Breed and some of the ones I've worked with really have great sense on the living plant, but they're kind of lacking in the cured material that I've seen for most autos on the market. So I think they have, they definitely still have development to go, but eventually I think the idea type of the plant where, the resin production, the density, and the agronomic qualities of the plant are there for them to be acceptable as trimmed flower. I just think in a lot of varieties, they need work on the terpene profiles and bringing some variety of terpene profiles. That still needs done. And that's, they're a newer variety. So photoperiods have had, thousands of years to develop these unique terpene profiles by farmers through centuries, so we're trying to incorporate those into a relatively new gene pool. So it's still limited, but there's, it's just a single gene for most autoflowering varieties based off lowrider. It's a single gene that causes autoflowering. So we should be able to introgress that gene nearly completely over time and break all that ruderalis crap out of there. So there's no reason that I see that photoperiods can't be competitive as flower with the best photoperiods nowadays in the future. There's just a lot of breeding progress that has to be done because they're competing with, you grow 10,000 plants, you pick the best clone. That's hard to compete with. Every seed from an autoflower has to be able to compete with the best single plant from a photoperiod. So, that's going to take time. And I don't think that's there yet, where an autoflower variety is going to compete with an elite photoperiod clone. But theoretically, there's no reason it won't be able to get there.
I see a lot of growers, especially up in the northern Canada areas there, that grow a lot of auto flowers and kill it. Quite happy with the flower in general, smokability, and they aren't necessarily using them for extracts. But that's necessary. That's just where I see them on a large scale being used. On an outdoor farming plot, basically. I I don't think the quality is there necessarily for to equal with the photo periods, and hopefully in time. But for right now, I just think they'll be for oil and extract production myself.
Yeah. I don't disagree. I mean, I see some amazing autoflowers, but I also grow photoperiods and mostly smoke photoperiods myself, even being an autoflower breeder. It's just hard to compete with the consistency of a clone. And, I know the varieties with the effects I like. So autoflowers just aren't quite there where you get the consistency and effect from seed lots from most autoflower breeders, I'd say.
Well, it just makes sense too. Is oil and concentrate is the over end goal. Is if you can produce, more in less time, 90 days on average for an auto. Shoot, you're not even ready to throw a good photo into flower at that point, in my opinion, from seed. So I mean, if you could harvest 4 times a year and get to that's definitely a plus if you're an extract artist. That's for sure.
Yeah, and autos can range from like 60 days seed to harvest to 120 or more, and the size of plant really changes a lot. A 60-day plant's going to be old school 1 foot lowrider. 120 plant's going to be a 6-7 foot bush, all around. So I don't know where I'm going with that.
So I've got a question for you as an auto breeder. Everybody would like to know, what is the trigger for an auto? And I've heard pot size. When it hits the bottom of that pot, it's usually a good time for it to trigger. And if that's the case, one of the things that we talk about is that ability for outdoor, for them to be clone like, you know what I mean? All in structure, same size, and, for harvestability. So if that's the case, will that be the case outdoors? Will they all trigger at the same time if they're not in pots, if they're straight into the soil? With the size all be similar? I mean, what will be the trigger at that point? What is the trigger?
So I don't really know I don't know if anyone knows yet exactly what is what in the flowering triggering system is happening with autoflowers. I assume that there's something basically broken in an autoflower gene that makes it so that it thinks that it's always time to flower. So it just flowers when it's mature. It's got to be one enzyme or something that's just functioning wrong. And I don't really know where the whole pot, the root, I've heard that from a few different people where, oh, autoflowering triggers when the root hits the bottom of the pot. In my experience, that isn't the case. It's almost, it's time, it's age based on, you know, time from germination. You stunt a plant if it's in a small pot, but it takes the same amount of time, at least with the autos that I've worked with. You know, there are supposedly some different sources of autoflowering genetics. Like I know there's some autoflowering Lebanese and some Mexican. I think lowrider is based off Russian ruderalis genes. I'm not sure. This is just from information I've a so it might be that those other types of autoflower genes act differently. And they might be multifactorial like that, where this is just a single gene, it flowers based on age.
So if it's not necessarily pot size, and I could see if I were to try to grow an auto and want a bigger plant, I would automatically assume that I'd use a larger pot or a deeper pot to get a larger auto. So what else could I do to help my get a larger auto? To beef her up a
So,
little bit. They don't
okay,
necessarily like to be fed, right? So you basically limited, or is that another myth as well that you can kind of, push them a little bit with nutrients?
I think you can push them, but with an auto, it's going to be bound by its genetics, first of all. But if you're getting the biggest plant for that genetic, then you want a lot. They do really well in large, unrestricted soil. So the time might not be significantly different, but they will get bigger in soil rather than in a pot. Yeah, but you're not going to be you're not going to be able to, like, 120-day auto is going to be a big fucking bush. A 60-day auto is never going to be that, it's just doesn't have the time to veg out and grow that frame.
That's nice to know. So when basically, if I'm looking for a larger yielding auto, I should look at the time factor, basically.
Yeah, and I think the term people use now is super autos for those longer flowering autos, which, I mean, if you're trying to look for a big auto, that might be practical for someone like in Oregon. They could plant it maybe indoors in January or something and get it outdoors and flower it out in the sun. But otherwise, you're approaching just a normal photo period cycle time, So it might also, well, I was going to say it might be if you have a year-long season, but most people with a year-long season are going to have like more of a 12-12 photo period, so they don't necessarily need a auto anyway.
So how important do you think is starting those seeds with microbes? I've heard Jeff Lowenfels actually talk about rolling the seed in some a soak, that rolling around in some microbes there and dropping them into the hole. Is it beneficial to start dosing them like that right from the get?
So I definitely think it can be. I do think mycorrhizal fungi is a good input, but part of it has to do with what that seed has been already, what organisms that seed has already been in contact with. So I like to start my seed in a really rich compost. So like probably 50% compost, 50% soil. And I know that seed's going to start and it's going to be really dark, lush green, and it's going to grow fast while it's in that little pot, and it's going to be ready for another active soil when I up pot it. I've found though that when I start a seed that is maybe less vigorous in that, so maybe a seed that was bred in a environment that is not very microbe rich, those seeds will sometimes just rot in my active seed start mix. So I don't know. What do you think, Brandon? This is more your thing. I'm just speaking from my own experience.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. So any seed is going to have microbes all over it from the parent plant material and just the environment. And if that comes from a healthy parent crop, those should be good microbes. So it's not going to have mycorrhizae on it because that's a soil bacteria. So if you want to inoculate it with mycorrhizae, that's great. Or if you have a healthy, long-term soil that has a healthy mycorrhiza population in it, you don't need to necessarily inoculate every time. Hopefully you shouldn't. So one thing I would mention while we're on this subject is some people were talking about high-side seed treatments and their ability to increase germination. I would say that's only true when you have pathogens. So if you have a healthy microbe population on your seeds and you do an H2O treatment, you just killed them all, which, okay, that's fine. And they're going to be inside your seeds too. You have endophytes inside your seed in some cases. But if you're going to do a seed treatment like that, you want to re-inoculate with healthy microbes. And a microbe inoculant beyond just mycorrhizae would be important, I'd say.
That inoculant could just be a rich soil, right? Like a really healthy soil. Yeah.
Yeah. Although seedlings are more susceptible to like Pythium and Rhizoctonia than adult plants are. So as long as that biologically active soil is free of those pathogens, it'd be great. If you're getting rotting, it might be because of that. And in that case, you could try planting into steam sterilized or pasteurized soil, inoculating beneficials in so that you know that that Rhizoctonia isn't in there.
Right. Well, I guess just winding down, I'll go into my own background in the cannabis industry a little bit, and then maybe at the end I'll bring up a couple cool projects that Mycophyte's been a part of. So I'm 24 years old, and I've probably had about 24 years in the cannabis industry, just because of my upbringing and where I'm from, and the whole. I grew up sort of out in the forest. I was homeschooled for a lot of my childhood, and sort of the hippie kid life. My parents were hippies, and that was my upbringing. And then eventually I moved into town and started to go to real school, and was a little self-conscious about being the hippie kid. And it ended up being a cool thing eventually. But I was like, so when the time came for my friends were smoking weed, I was kind of the one that was holding out. I was like, man, like, I always smell like weed. I try to not smell like weed. So eventually I started smoking, and pretty much around the same time that I started smoking, I got into cultivation too, mostly because I had people close to me that were, and I knew that like that was the easiest job I could get, because that was what was around. And getting older, that started to be a bigger job where I went to California and helped grow a crop for part of the season. And that was a bit of my upbringing. I saw that, I understood that, and it was at a time I was in high school when all this legalization was happening here in Oregon, and I could see that like there was it was a bit of a gold rush. A lot of people were jumping into the cannabis industry. And I was too young to be a part of it at the time. I think maybe I was almost 18, but you can't work in the cannabis industry until you're 21. So I kind of understood that wasn't going to happen for me unless I was working on the black market. And so coming out of high school, the first job I got, like real job, not on a farm, was at a fertilizer company, a soil and fertilizer company in Oregon. Roots Organic is where I was working. That's where I met Kyle. But I just started there on the soil line. I was stacking pallets of soil and filling bags of soil and just doing the grunt work there. And I showed interest there. So like I walked over to the trial greenhouse sometimes and like, oh, this is cool. I like growing stuff too. And that kind of got me up the ranks at that company where I was able to, I moved around to all the different departments, and eventually I made it to being able to work in the quality control greenhouse. And that's when I started working with Kyle in research and development. And we made a bokashi inoculum there. We were actually, we got into that. I was already pretty into all that stuff, having personal connections to Josh and Kelly at Dragonfly Earth Medicine. They're sort of family friends, and I grew up in similar circles. Their son is like one of my best friends. So I was already into biological ideas. I was already making my own soil mixes and brewing compost teas, Korean natural farming. I was already inspired by that thanks to Dragonfly Earth Medicine. So coming into this new job at research and development with Kyle, who, you know, fresh out of college, he's a mycologist, really smart people that I'm working with at this time. And we developed a bokashi product, and we got really into it. And I got to do a lot of research at that time, and we were trialing bokashi and EM1 in the greenhouse there. So they had a greenhouse where they would pretty much test every batch of soil they made and basically grow some tomatoes and make sure they're growing as they should. And the guy that ran that greenhouse did a lot of side-by-sides. And so we were trying this bokashi product in the EM1, and we weren't seeing many results. It was we were seeing poor results sometimes because all of the starch in the bran from the bokashi would solidify the soil and turn it into a cake, and then fungus gnats would come in, and it was just a bad scene with this product we were making. And we were thinking we were improving the soil by adding more biology, but we were just adding fungus gnats, and that's not the kind of biology we want to be adding. So we were working on that for a while, and eventually I sort of realized that commercial soil and commercial, or I don't want to call it commercial or conventional, the soil that people are buying to grow their cannabis is not going to be, you can't just add one thing and say, now I have living soil. Like, now I've elevated my cannabis grow and I have living soil. I'm going to have more terpenes. Like, there's so much more to it as far as building a soil that's going to produce these suppressive soils and suppressive crops. And so leaving there, I went to intern with Dragonfly Earth Medicine on their farm in Canada. So I spent a season basically growing food and cannabis at their farm there, and in the temperate climates of British Columbia, and multiple greenhouses and light depping multiple greenhouses. And I just learned a lot about all these soil building techniques that I think are really, they're saving the planet by sequestering carbon into our soils and creating soil organic matter. We're restoring our soils, and we're preventing a lot of the negative effects that come with industrial agriculture. So I guess that's my background in the cannabis industry. Is I came from just growing cannabis to make money. That's what it was, and I sort of went around the whole thing and saw the different aspects of different levels of organic farming. I don't have much experience with non-organic farming, but it's not too far off from bottle feeding organics, and that I do understand that, and I understand why it can be improved upon, and that's where building our own soils in place, carbon farming and regenerative farming, even indoors, can really save the planet. So that's where I'm coming from, I guess, as a consultant here.
I used to run routes back in the day. Did you actually, were you there after 215? Hopefully,
Yeah,
2015?
I graduated high school in 2015. I'm 24 years old. So I was there. I was probably working there by 2016. About.
I chuckled a little bit when you were talking about the fungus gnats there a little bit, because I ran routes from 12 to 15, and I gave it up in 15 because at that point they got real bad with the fungus gnats, and I was like, oh, I just can't do it anymore. So I had to actually hang up the routes at that point. It was a great medium up until that point. Did they ever honestly get that under control? A lot of people use it these days. I
Yeah,
see
no,
it, and I
I'm sure they
thought
did.
about going back, but
I'm sure they
I've
did.
never
It's
done
not their
that.
fault, you know. Like fungus gnats occur, and you can make the best soil mix, but if you put it in a bag and put it on a lot where it's raining all day and there's a big puddle of water underneath it, you're gonna get something growing in there, and it might not be beneficial. So I'd say that's the beast of industrial anything, whether it's industrial compost production, which has lots of downsides, or industrial soils that people are running. That if they can be improved upon, we can be doing better if we work a little harder on our soil mixes. We can make something better for less money, and it's going to be good for the environment too.
Is there products you guys offer?
It's more of a, that's why we're coming in at, we're trying to be consultants here. We don't want to sell products. We sell a very select few products, or maybe we tell people that they should buy a select few products, but it is more of a method, and really it's a lifestyle. You have to look at your cultivation as your lifestyle, not just your job, and you have to really like doing it, because if you don't, you're not gonna pay attention to the subtleties that are gonna really they make the difference for people.
So where should we start? If we were looking, somebody like myself, just looking to start, taking care of my soil, what were some of the products that you would suggest to me to get my soil pumping, get it living, get all the fungi popping in there,
Okay, well,
make it
the
as fast
EM1,
as it could be?
the EM1 is a great product. We don't sell that. We do teach people how to produce their own. That's a great product that's very easy. Korean natural farming inputs, those aren't products that we sell. We do teach people how to produce them, or you can learn from the internet. Those are going to improve your soil biology. And then mulching itself is going to encase a lot of the moisture that your soil biology is using. And then Stropharia is mycelium. It's a spawn. So just like any mushroom producing fungi, it comes in a sterile plastic bag. And usually for mushroom producing fungi, you would slice a hole in the bag and it would start growing lion's mane out the side of it. This variety, you would just crumble it up on top of your soil, mulch on top of that, and then keep it consistently watered. And so I guess that's the only product we're selling as of now is Stropharia, wine cap mushroom. And you can get that if you contact us through our website or through our Instagram. We'll have something on our website for PayPal eventually, but we do not yet. And the best thing, if you really want to start improving your soil, would be to reach out to us and give us a phone call and review the services on our website and read what we're all about. And then on that phone call, we can discuss what it would entail. And then beyond that, we would have to write up some sort of proposal to do a consultation for you guys. And that could mean we drive out, that could mean we fly out, or that could mean we do it all over the internet. And if you want to take soil samples, we'll give you the right protocols to get a consistent sample every time, and you will send those to a lab of your choice or our choice. I think we would probably want to work with our lab, and we'll analyze the results of those soil tests and give you recommendations. These could be more of a conventional recommendation. Add 300 pounds of lime per however many acres, or something crazy like that. Or it could be add this much biological amendment and you'll achieve the same thing. So we do have different ways we can offer to achieve the same thing, as far as if you need quick results and you need to make sure your soil's at the right pH when you get your crop planted. We sort of offer any of the methods. We understand any of the management methods, and yeah, just a consultation from there. That would be how we would help you, is the consulting basis.
Do you guys have a YouTube channel where you have some how-to videos posted? Anything like that yet?
Man, it'd be cool. It doesn't seem to be enough time in the day for us to get all that done. A lot of us have day jobs that are pretty demanding, and just running the Instagram page is kind of a lot of work. So one thing at a time right now. And we've been doing short videos on Instagram because we can post those, and those are cool. Those are pretty informational. I guess we can go into some of the videos we've made. We're doing a project in sort of an industrial area in our town, and this landowner, he's a really nice old man, and all the properties around him are sort of warehouses or vacant, and he has this nice house with these big beautiful trees on the land there. And he found out from basically, I won't get too into it, but there's groundwater pollution from problems that were associated with a gas station years ago, and the county knows about them, but they're not doing anything about the pollution. So this landowner hired us to clean up his land, essentially. So we've inoculated it with fungi, basically a berm around his property that collects the groundwater as it passes, and it will be processed by the fungi, and the other diversity that the fungi brings, the worms and insects and bacteria that are attracted to that fungi, are also processing it all. So that's I know I wanted to share at least one of the cool projects we've been working on, and that's one that I'm pretty proud of, just because it's sort of an unspoken problem in the area, and we're doing something small about it. Maybe we aren't fixing the oil spill, but we're making it a little bit better. So that's something that's nothing to do with the cannabis industry that I'm pretty proud of us being a part of.
That is pretty awesome. So do you think that the mushroom will ever be used in landfills like that on more large scales to kind of clean up messes like that we've made? Do you think they could be used it like that on a large scale landfill?
I'm sure Brandon has a good answer. They are great for disposing of waste products in one way or another. I believe it's bacteria that's used to dispose of or harvest the methane gas from dairy manure. I'm not exactly sure what organism it is, but our natural gas that's produced from biogas extractors, that is microbes that are producing that and extracting that from that material. Yes.
Yeah, for a landfill, I like the large application. It's going to be so anaerobic that a fungi is probably not going to be able to survive in there very well, unless you're going to treat. You might be able to treat. If you have a runoff from a toxic site or something like that, you can create sort of swales of fungi inoculated areas that'll help treat runoff water or something like that. But in landfills, the methane that they're recapturing is produced by archaea, so methanogens that are breaking down things in anaerobic situations usually, and then they'll cap a landfill and harvest the methane. As far as landfill material, there are some fungi that can process certain types of plastics, but something that's going to be able to break down the diversity of plastic in a landfill is pretty hard to imagine, at least at this time. I don't know that it's practical yet.
So do they actually break it down into something usable into the food chain? Uh, the food cycle after they're done with it? Is it something clean and is it been completely clean and usable to the environment and pass through them?
I think certain plastics can be completely degraded by some organisms, but I don't know. A lot of plastics are going to break down into smaller types of plastic and then stop there, unless there's another organism that can do the next step or something like that.
What about oils? What about say petroleum contaminated soil being used to produce oyster mushrooms?
I mean, I think that I hesitate to say the oyster mushrooms are safe to eat, but I think it can completely break it down. Yeah, unless there's heavy metal contamination or some type of thing that you can't break down a heavy metal. You can change its form or something like that, or move it around, but it's still going to be an arsenic ion.
So if you guys are curious to keep learning about what we're talking about, we don't have a YouTube or an instructional video to offer you. We will soon have a blog page on our website. So if you bookmark our website and start visiting it periodically, we'll have a blog page up, and that'll talk in depth about some of our projects that we're working on, and then also some of these cool concepts that I think people would like to hear about, or maybe we will post an article, a research case study, and then we'll give our own synopsis of it in more plain English, so people can learn about some of the cool things that fungi and microbes can do. So that would be. It's not there yet. We're working on it, getting a blog page up on our website, and then we'll have a little bit more content and information for people to view. Right now, our Instagram and our website are the main things that you should check out to learn more about our company. Mycophyte Solutions on Instagram and mycophyte.com.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing more projects that you guys are putting forward, more videos and things like that you guys. I completely understand about the time thing, though, man. It's tough to do everything, man. There's just not enough time in the day these days, man. I go to bed feeling guilty almost like every day that I'm just like, oh man, I should have, could have. Man, there's just not enough time, man. It goes by too quick these days.
Yeah,
You're only 24, brother. Let me tell you, as somebody that's a little bit older there, that time gets faster and faster and faster and faster, faster, faster. So good
That's
luck to you if you can't find
well,
it. If you're having a tough time finding those hours in the day right now, which is a great thing, it means you're doing some good stuff.
yeah.
Man,
Well,
you could be struggling at my age, Chief. uh,
yeah. Well, I can't imagine for you. You must be a little bit nocturnal because it's almost 11 here, and I think I'm running out of steam.
Yeah, my dog's waiting to get an evening walk here, so I'm gonna have to bounce in a minute.
Right.
well, I appreciate you guys taking time to come on, tell me a little bit about yourselves and Microphyte Solutions. I greatly appreciate it, man. I can see that you guys have a lot to offer the cannabis community, and I'm glad that you were able to come on and tell us about each other there, because I find that's as so many shows that I've done over the years. I think that's very key, to be honest with you, getting to know the people behind, uh, a project, a product, counseling program like yourselves there. It's better to know the people that are behind it, their personal beliefs, what they're about, how they feel. It's easier to fall in line and go, man, there's some cool, intelligent guys right there. That's if I'm going to get a hold of anybody, that's the kind of consultation I'm looking for. So I'm glad you guys take time to introduce yourselves into this part of the cannabis community. Like I said, time is something very valuable. It does go by very quick, guys. It does go by very quick. So, use it very wisely. And thank you for, donating a little bit of your time to this show. And a couple other things I'd like to tell you before you go, uh, because you have taken the time, donated your time to the show. This Zoom link that I gave you guys today is always good for all upcoming shows, upcoming wormholes, mainly wormholes. If you ever happen to tune into the show and that we are talking about a subject that you'd like or would like to contribute to, you do not need an invitation at this point. You can just pop on, talk about whatever you want to talk about. Just hang on the Zoom, and we have a lot of great guests. 420 is coming up. I'd like to extend that invitation up to you guys as well. I do a 420 24-hour episode here, all day 420, and there'll be tons of people coming and going. Breeder Steve, Kevin Drodry, amongst many, many other people will be coming, going all day. So if you want to pop on at some point, 420, and say hello, happy 420, please do. You have the link. I'd look forward to it. So thank you guys for coming on. The only other thing I'd like to get from you guys, it's tough to do with two people, but I'm going to throw it out there, is the soundbite. Basically, it's kind of a commercial for you guys for this episode. In my words, how it usually would go, it's, hey, this is Eagle, and I'm on fucking Talking Shit with Eagle, episode 377. You guys can add to that, whatever. It's kind of, let's see if you guys can sync up. Let's see how good the team is if you guys can sync up a soundbite.
I think I'll just say, hey, we are Mycophyte. We are on fucking Talking Shit with Eagle. What else?
Episode 377.
Okay. Here, I'll do it now. I don't know if we can edit this for the sound, but hey, we're Mycophyte Solutions on Talking Shit with Eagle, and oh no, I did it wrong. Okay, hold on. Cut. Hey, we're Mycophyte Solutions. We're on fucking Talking Shit with Eagle, episode 377, and come check us out.
Yeah, I'm Brandon. You can find me at Growing Higher, and
I'm already. Yeah, that's good. That's enough there. I don't know how this is all.
Oh no. We got to throw Brandon in there too. We got to throw. It's only fair. It's only fair. We got to throw Brandon in there too. Brandon, can you please? I'll cut them together. I'll splice them together without my rude interruption there. Sorry.
So what you want me to
I'm
do?
ready.
The whole thing?
Yeah, you're a part. You're in your addition to the soundbite, where they can find you. You're part of it all. So
Yeah, just say
how
you're
we can
growing
find you
higher.
out. It's
I'll tag my own Insta. You say you're growing higher, and I'll link my
All right. Well, it's been great on Talking Shit with Eagle. I'm growing higher.
and I'm Nettle Juice on IG. He's growing higher on IG. Thanks, guys. I'm appreciate you letting us use your platform, and it was great chatting with you. And hopefully next time we can get maybe Kyle or Sam on here so you can meet more of our company.
Yeah, maybe
Yes.
Kyle will pop in sometime with that link too. He's got a lot of cannabis knowledge, so hopefully you get to meet him
Love that.
sometime.
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Thank you guys. You have a
Awesome.
great night, and I look forward to hearing from you again.
Awesome.
Thanks for having
again.
us.
Great meeting you.
Have a great night. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Hopefully, you have enjoyed 377. Me stumbling through this one. Oh, I should have been more prepared on this one. I should have been more prepared. I'll be the first to admit that. Some great guys with a lot of knowledge. I wish I'd been more prepared to pick more of it out of them. Like, good sir, Smile. Good thing. Ah, damn, Smile, I missed you tonight. Hopefully you had fun. You guys know the deal. If you guys want to come hang out in the wormhole, please do so. If you guys don't, I appreciate your time thus far. Please do something nice for somebody. Random acts of kindness do save lives. I'm a living, breathing example of that. Hopefully, I'll see you guys in a few minutes in the wormhole. I am out of here.